Test 1, 2, 3.
Louder, like you mean it.
You're on the air.
This is Rick Tosada. I'm standing here in Goldfield, Nevada at the Dusty Fenders Grill and Fill. I'm standing here with the inventor and innovator of the aerodynamic air turbine engine, Haskell Karl, who's 89 years old. I'm also standing here with Lou, who is the owner of Dusty Fenders Grill and Fill. Say hi.
Hi, you young people and old people. And yes, I'm Haskell Karl, and I invented the innovation of the air turbine engine with Ron Rockwell, who built it for me and made the new improvements on it. And I've been eating here at this restaurant for quite a while, and they serve good food. We just had a beautiful breakfast, and it tasted good too. And here I'll introduce you to one of the owners here. She's Dusty Fender, and her husband run the place, and in Goldfield, Nevada. And we're having a good time. We're taking a picture of her and the restaurant. I hope you people on the road will come in and have your dinner here or breakfast. Okay.
Lou, the food here is terrific. I just had a wonderful breakfast, and it was amazing. Want to tell us a little bit about your restaurant?
Well, I learned that you can't survive one day without biscuits and gravy. This is what you learn in Goldfield. You take all of the traditional southwestern type recipes, and you do as much home cooking as you can, and people appreciate it. That's what I find out. It's a lot of people going back and forth doing a lot of things these days, and everybody's up for a home cooked meal, and that's why we're here. Dusty Fenders Grill and Fill, at your service, everybody. Come by and say hey.
Thank you so much, Lou.
Right. Thank you. You're welcome.
And this is Rick Tosada standing here with Haskell Karl, the innovator and inventor of the aerodynamic air turbine engine. We're standing in front of the original Santa Fe Club that was built in 1905. It is actually the longest running business in Goldfield, Nevada. Today is September 24th. I'm standing here again with Haskell Karl. We're going to go ahead and go inside and interview Mr. Karl about how he designed and created the original aerodynamic air turbine engine in the 1960s. Once again, we're standing here in front of the original Santa Fe Club. I'm standing here with Haskell Karl, the inventor of the aerodynamic air turbine engine. Haskell, how long have you lived here in Goldfield?
I've lived in Goldfield for 22 years, and I come from California, and this is Goldfield, Nevada, of course, and I've been enjoying myself, and the people are good here, and there's no smog. That was wonderful.
What led you to Goldfield?
Well, I had some problems with this turbine motor. I wanted to get out of the city and play it safe, of course, and I like to be by myself with less population. I feel more comfortable that way. And so I'm here with Ron Rockwell, and he's doing a good job. He did a wonderful job on the turbine motor, and I appreciate everything he done, and he was a very, very good machinist, and I can't beat that.
When you mention safety, what do you mean by safe coming to Goldfield?
Well, as far as the oil companies wouldn't want me around, because I wouldn't have no more problems with oil. You don't need it anymore with the air turbine engine. It's a replacement. But in those days, it would be a little difficult to get it on the market, and it would cause a little problem with the oil companies. Not a little problem, but a very big problem. And I'm turning it over to my man here, and he'll give you some more information or questions, and so forth.
Well, we would like to give a special thanks to Mr. Jim Marsh, who actually has many locations and businesses in the Goldfield, Nevada area, and we'd like to say a special thank you for letting us use his saloon here. Thank you. I'm standing here again with Haskell Karl, and he had mentioned the great Ron Rockwell, and he happened to pop up over here. Ron, would you like to say a couple words about the aerodynamic air turbine engine?
Well, I really know nothing about it. I just had to build it. But Haskell kind of said, I need this recreated, and I can just about build anything, working with Martin Missile Company and Royal Raymond Rife and John F. Crane Corporation. And then when Haskell Karl got wind of what I could do, it took me a while to listen to this, but when I talked to Haskell more and more over the years, and then we started learning more. This is such an advanced technology, and we are now setting up a Vortec Implosion research test center in Las Vegas, Nevada. And thanks to the knowledge of Haskell Karl, I think we can facilitate this advantage to, it will actually retrain people in universities all over the world, because this technology is kind of very far advanced. The power is so much more power than an internal combustion engine. And right now we brought the turbine up here. After all its corrections with the bearings, we went through a nightmare fiasco of problems, recreating and redesigning things. Now we have it completed, and in just a little while we're going to put that turbine inside on a table so Haskell can actually see the timing rods go into the engine and time it from the outside through 2 separate cylinders.
Haskell, this must be pretty amazing for you. You must be pretty excited knowing that you're going to see this air turbine engine again up and running.
I've been waiting for this moment for quite a while, and I didn't know whether I'd live long enough to get it on the market. And Ron convinced me that he could build it. I gave him the information he wanted and photographs and so forth. And I'm very happy with him, and I picked the right man. And the reason why he was the right man, he believed in me. He believed what I told him was absolutely true.
About what year was this when you met Ron Rockwell?
Well, let's see. Ron, would you know about that?
I believe that was late part of '03.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
When did you, how did you hear about Mr. Rockwell?
I met this other woman, this friend of mine, and she introduced me to him. And we went from there. I used to come in here, and she talked to me about it for months. And she said she thought she had a man that could build it for me. Her name was Carla Stevens, and she put us together. So that was it. It was a miracle that we found each other. And I'm very happy to have a man like Rockwell with his background that believed in Haskell Karl. And I'm telling you, public, he's a good man. He's a very honest person, and he is a very, very good machinist. And he had a machinist expert too to help him on that. And anyway, I'm very happy to be standing here with him right now in the Santa Fe, motel here. And I'd say I couldn't have found a better man than Ron Rockwell.
Ron Rockwell, question I have is, when Haskell presented this air turbine engine to you, what led you to believe in it? What did you see in it to where you feel you can recreate this and this can actually be world-changing?
When I seen that original drawing, it was actually falling apart, and I told Haskell, we're going to need to laminate this. And then the more I talked with him, I questioned him in different areas, and then the more I started thinking about this, I thought, my God, could you just imagine doing a air vacuum tornado system in this engine to bring a Vortec implosion? And I'll tell you what, the more working on this, in fact, we never signed agreements or anything until about 3 weeks after I got started, and Haskell says, go ahead and you start. And when I gave him in fact, the pictures you've seen over at Dusty's in the saloon, that's when the bar there, that's that was right at the first 3 weeks of work, what I created there. And the more I talked to Haskell, it was almost like every morning, every day, and picking his brain. And the more we put this thing together, the more it started making sense. And then the real excitement started really turning on.
Where was it in that moment that you actually believed this could work?
It was probably the time when I started spending thousands of hours making the master templates and the blades. And the more I started studying that and look at the slides that we blew up into 8x10s, and then I kept looking at those, and Cliff Cruz, who was working on the project, I kind of pulled him right on in. I said, you're going to be part of this if you know it or not. And with him being a 27-year tool and die maker, and myself working with rocket components since 1959, it gets to a point like this is a whole new era in technology.
Ron, continuing on, one question I had is, When you first saw what Haskell had created, something inside of you must have said, this is a new innovation, this is a history in the making. What was it that you actually saw that you said, I can help recreate this? And where did you feel you can get with this project?
Well, I started seeing that this thing had a possibility, the way this could ramp up air, and it would ramp up the vacuum and then vac up the implosion. And not thoroughly understanding it, the more we assemble this after the thousands of hours of the blades, then going to the originals and putting them onto rotors, and then we built it onto a stator, and we just kept going with it. And the more I kept thinking, I said, my God, this would totally eliminate solar power, all these windmill powered generators, battery powered cars, and then it would make air clean back the way it should be. And then the best part, we can put America back to work.
Haskell, what led you to create this? What was that flash of light that went through your head to even want to create this?
I'm kind of good on that. I observe everything in nature. Birds fly. They were the first ones that flew before Lindbergh. And then I watched certain conditions, like where the two airplanes, there was three of them up there in the United States Air Force. One of them flamed out, and the other two got behind him and pulled them along with the vacuum suction from the other two ships and brought them in. And that was observing. And of course, the vacuum cleaner does a lot of things that works pretty good. But they showed a Volkswagen being picked up by suction, but it isn't just the suction, there's more to it than that. And if anybody ever works on it, they'll find that out. But we got together, we hit it off right from the start. He trusted me and I trusted him. The contract was good. And I say that I don't think the turbine would be around today. It would be a dead issue if it wasn't for Ron, because I felt safe with him and he gave me enough confidence to want to build it. And so that was it. We hit together. After all, his name is E-L-L, and my last name is Haskell, E-L-L. We fused together on those letters.
I never thought about that. I never gave that a thought.
Ron, what is the theory behind this technology?
It's a vacuum implosion. And what happens, from what I can see, and we're going to find this under advanced testing next week, that when it starts up to around 7,000 RPM and maybe a little bit above, maybe a very little bit below, the vacuum pump starts it up. And then when the vacuum is pulled back through the inner wall of the turbine and the outer wall, it goes through this remote controlled throttle ring, which Haskell had, that was fixed. He had to take it apart to change it, where mine is remote control on radio control system. Then when it pulls back, I kept listening to Haskell how this vacuum would pull backwards. So you got to think about it a little bit different than a turbocharger. And when it starts to pull back into that first rotor, when it hits the second one, which was a stator, and we've done a lot of modifications in there, you can see how it would ramp up and accelerate it very quickly. And then when it hits the driver on the angle that what it sits at, it starts, from what I can see, when we do the testing, I think the theory will be correct. It will create such an implosion factor. The power is very vicious. And I hope everything stays together so we can demonstrate it to the world. And then once we prove the test, then we'll do injection moldings in titanium, and it will be like in one-piece units. We can build them a lot bigger, like 7-foot diameter, take them up to 1,000,000 horsepower, hydraulic gear reduct them, and put them like on General Electric 286,000 kV generators, turn them at 3,500 RPM, and actually technically we could put 4 of those in Vegas and power up Vegas.
You know what I'm hearing here, Mr. Karl, is that Ben Franklin saw a lightning bolt and felt that he contained that and create power. Sounds to me like you felt you could create a tornado effect, put it in a cylinder, and create power. Is that about right?
Ben Franklin did with his kite. He showed about the electricity, what it can do. But Tesla was the main one. He's my favorite inventor, and he had a lot of knowledge. And Tesla did what he could, and they didn't want him to give free energy away and broadcast it through the air. And when he passed away, he was, you might say, a pauper. They didn't want him around because he wanted to give the public a little more freedom and free power to a degree. And of course, they didn't want that. The warlords they want to make money, and that's why they didn't want him to bring any of these things out. But he did a good job on Niagara Falls when he didn't have the technology for making the metal strong enough to make the generators. Today we have the technology way in advance, and that makes this turbine very feasible, and it'll work, and it'll change the world of energy, and everybody can have one in their home. There's no carbon monoxide. Single people won't have to have fear that their power's going off, and that they don't have an air conditioner, especially the older people. And this will save the world, and we have to do this job. We don't fear. There's no fear of them stopping it because essentially it's in need right now. They can't stop it, and it's got to go. And Ron is the one that made it was possible. If I didn't meet Ron, there wouldn't be no turbine, and we'd be in a lot more problems with our Earth and for all the people in the world. And I hope that this will, God bless all of them, when this goes to the market, and they turn them out like donuts, and everybody could have one. Even the dog can have one in his doghouse.
Glazed or unglazed?
Yeah.
Well, this is called the Air Turbine Engine, Ron. What kind of air is this?
Ambient air, the same air that you are breathing. And one thing that Haskell just triggered a little thought wave. Back in 1972, I created a heat pump and an air conditioner that worked strictly with the flow of air. There was absolutely no moving mechanical parts of any kind, no R12, no R22, no R134A as we know it today, just moving air. And then I told Dr. Bob Beverly, I said, you realize now with this turbine, we could attach that unit, and it's very, very small, right to the air turbine, and we got free heat and free air. I guess that's called a bonus that goes with it.
Yes, sir. Haskell Karl, one question would be, cut. Haskell, some people might say that this is based on perpetual motion. What's your answer to that?
Well, I talked to one particular man. He was a physicist, Dr. Rose, and came up to see me. It was over some other project that I worked on, which I'll go into later maybe. But he said it was against the laws of physics, and I said, well, we wouldn't have a universe if it was against the laws of physics, because things grow, and we can't make that statement because this is something that's beyond any of the conception of the engineers in the world. And so I said, would you now please leave? And that was the end of that. So he was kind of amazed what I said to him, but that was a follow-up from some other project that I'll go into later.
That triggered a thought wave right here. Just like I went to UNLV for the energy conference here, and I was there with Mr. Pickens, and there was a professor there, and I talked to him in the lobby, and I said, you know what's very unique? You're a professor in physics. Is that correct? Yes. And I said, okay, go to the space station, 250 miles up, the International Space Station. Now pick a course that's not on a collision course with any of our planets in our galaxy, and go for 50,000 years at 50,000 miles an hour, and tell me, where is the end of space? And then once you find it, what's on the other side of that? So now this is a time for all your updated scientists to understand we're in a whole new mechanical era. And I'll tell you what, this will be the stepping stone for space travel. Now you take the space shuttle, it's $15,000 a second when that leaves the launch pad. You realize the expense factor there? Now, give me the room to build 2 of these, and I'll show you how. If Haskell hangs around, which I'm not going to allow him to pass on, he's going to have to be here, because I know I can go to the space station and back for a $100 bill. Now you tell me that wouldn't raise an eyebrow?
Just about do it, yeah. It would raise a lot of eyebrows all over the world. And even the president would be amazed.
I don't think so, because it's called politics.
Oh, yeah, we can't count on that.
No, we don't. And we don't get involved in carbon credits, because that is not exactly a smart way to go. We're going to do it on our own, control it ourselves, and develop it ourselves.
That's good.
Now, does this engine take any sort of a fuel, transmission fluid, radiator, anything? Does it take anything other than air?
Ambient air, just as you are breathing. It takes one gulp of air. But over the last few years, I told Haskell how we could take and put nitrogen in it, vacuum it down, put nitrogen in it, and then put a liquid nitrogen capsule, about 1 ounce, and put it in a stainless steel holder and put it in the back side of the air turbine. Now we create a density altitude. Now you got more lift. Well, guess what happens? If the rake angles are right, the progressive pitch on the blades are right, this thing could produce phenomenal power.
What kind of power are we talking exactly in RPMs?
The RPM range from the best, from Haskell is telling me, 27,000 RPM and up. It gets very wild because it goes into the sound barrier and it goes totally quiet. When we put these together in a larger diameter, the foot-pounds of torque would be phenomenal. It's just, I would hate to see anybody who could measure it.
Once it breaks that sound barrier and you have a noise and all of a sudden it goes dead silent, would you consider that implosion?
Ask Haskell Karl. He's the one that designed this nightmare.
Yeah, that would be similar to when an airplane goes through the sound barrier, and it may have something to do with frequencies also in combination. But when it smooths itself out, it's like when the airplane smooths itself out when it goes through the sound barrier. That's technically what you could call it. So this has the same principle, possibly. That's what's happening. I haven't tested that for a lab yet, but it will be tested in the future.
And this is vortex implosion, is that correct?
That's correct, on air. And this is why Haskell has talked to me several times of doing a guided fin between the inner wall and the outer wall so it continues a spiral clockwise. When it enters the air intake, it starts amplifying at a vicious speed. And then on top of that, we also control that more on the exhaust manifold. And I can't go too much information on it, like TMI, too much information. So that's why when you see this turbine on the counter and we spin it up, it will have a black velvet cover over the center. This way here, there's a couple of smart engineers out there could put this together, and we don't need it going out there for a free ride. Haskell dedicated his life to it. I have dedicated 99% of my time to it. And now we're so close, I think the excitement's going to really amplify up. Yeah. And also we have a federal marshal friend who has been watching the turbine. He has seen it, he understands it, and he said as soon as you have your test platform up with the strobe light and the smoke, and you have your infrared up and the camera running on it, and we're able to study that curve, I will make a phone call, he says, to Wiley or JPL, and I will have you set up for testing at any time you want it.
Mr. Karl, what is your legacy here? What do you want to leave behind? Why the air turbine engine?
Well, it's the greatest invention of our time. Not that I'm trying to brag, but they don't have anything in the world like it. Maybe the aliens have, but we don't. But we do now, due to this man, and I'm going to shake his hand right here. We made a good combination, and like I said, ELL, we're fused. Okay, now we're fused hand with a handshake. Is that good enough for you?
Yeah, never let it go.
All right, now that's for the public. All right.
All right. That was beautiful. I love it. Once again, we're standing here in front of the original Santa Fe saloon, owned again by Mr. Jim Marsh and loaned to us for this special interview with Mr. Haskell Karl and Mr. Ron Rockwell, the inventors of the aerodynamic air turbine engine. One question I do have is, how do you feel this will change the world, society, government?
Well, number one, the government's not going to like it one bit because they're trying to control every working individual on the planet. And this is one of the reasons why I do not want to go public with this turbine. We're going to let the working population be part of it. And it will just change the workforce around, and people will have money in their pocket. And there wouldn't be, I could tell you right now, I could put every working individual in Las Vegas, Nevada to work. They wouldn't be out of work because we're going to stay out of politics.
So, from what I see with this invention, this can literally stop wars. People are fighting over, our great militaries over there fighting for oil. It seems to me with this air turbine engine, you'll no longer need fuel in a car or oil.
That is correct, and I also thought about making up a special molded glass bottle. Got a camel on it, and with a smile on his face, and put crude oil in it, and just put Iraqi cologne on it.
One thing I did hear you say before, which I really appreciated, because I myself am an ex-veteran of the United States Air Force and Desert Storm, you said that when this is all done, when you create your factories, you actually like to put disabled vets to work.
That is absolutely correct, because they're the ones that made this possible, that we could actually create this turbine, work at peace of mind, and then they gave their lives for America. The least we can do is put them all to work.
What do you feel about that, Mr. Karl?
I feel exactly the same that Ron said, and it will change a lot of other things. There'll be offshoots of this knowledge that'll be used for some of the other things that we can come up with. And but it's a big breakthrough, and I'm glad we were able to do it during these troubled times, which will give them a little hope.
Right.
And if we can come up with that, maybe we can solve some other big problems with O12 that's coming along. And I'm thinking about a few things, but I can't say nothing about it right now.
What do you think about energy? How can this help us on the energy side of it, not just like as far as the automotive side of it? How about the energy side of it?
Are you speaking of electrical?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can take like a nuclear power plant. When you create the nuclear power for the heat, and you boil the water and get the steam, and then you're turning that steam generator, the control room is called a containment area in a nuclear facility. You'll no longer need to worry about control rods, because they're going to become history. We just take the steam-powered turbine off, put the air turbine engine on it, which would be much larger in diameter, and we put a hydraulic reduction unit on it, and it produces up close to 1 million horsepower, and you have the whole electrical grid will work the same.
So would your this invention, is this something that you'd like to actually power a city with?
Yes. I'd like to start everything west of the Mississippi, and then when it catches on, then the product was developed, created in America, and now we can export it to other countries.
Sounds to me like bye-bye smokestacks.
100%. It's just like at UNLV, Al Gore made a statement over there, and he talked to the guy at the end of the table, at the round table at UNLV on an energy conference, who was the head of Nevada Power, and he said, what are you going to do with these smokestacks? The emissions going up. He said, I want it done now, not tomorrow. And that was Al Gore speaking, and I loved how strong he talked to that guy. I thought he was going to crawl under the table.
Well, as much as you may be making enemies as far as oil goes, it seems to me like you'll be making a lot of friends when it comes to Greenpeace, saving the planet, the ozone layer. That we're out here today in Goldfield, the sky is beautiful, it's blue. I'd sure like to see this in Los Angeles sometime.
Oh, definitely. And then could you just imagine an airplane flying around with these air turbines on it? There's no cold fusion here. There's no atomic power. Actually, I would like to do like Lindbergh did. I would like to take a plane with these twin turbines on it and fly it around the world nonstop in excess of 400 miles an hour. And if that doesn't wake up America, I don't know what will.
What do you think about this, Mr. Karl?
He's got a good imagination like me, but it's a true imagination. And it could be even better things coming out of this that we don't even know yet. But it'll give the American people in the world hope. And hope is what we need right now because of what's happening to our environment. And this will help cut down some of the environment, quite a bit of it. And the oil companies will still make their money on plastics and other products. So they're not going to be completely at loss. But the percentage isn't that much we get out of the oil. It's, of course, they use other products with it. But he's right about it, and maybe I'm right too. But I'm hoping that this will go very soon. We can't wait. We can't wait any hour, minute, or second longer. That's it.
Well, you know, in this world there are dream makers and there are dreamers, and it seems to me like I'm standing with two dream makers, and you both give the world a lot of hope, and I know we all appreciate that very much. This is Rick Tosada for Aerodynamic Air Turbine Engine, and we'll be continue on with some more interviews shortly.
How about putting America back to work where all of our industries have left our country?
Let them get their pictures first.
Hello, once again, this is Rick Tosada with AATE, the Aerodynamic Air Turbine Engine. It's actually here, right in front of us right now. This is actually bringing theory and concept into reality. This is no longer just something that we're dreaming about. It's actually sitting right here. I'm sitting here with the inventors, both Mr. Haskell Karl and Mr. Ron Rockwell. Haskell, you had this machine in 1962. You brought it in front of scientists and researchers at the Wiley Technologies.
Yes, I did.
What happened when you had shown this to them? What did they do?
Well, I came in with the ion motor, of course, since it's been named that in the present day, and I had an appointment all set up with them. You can't just come into the place. It's Wiley Laboratory in El Segundo, California. And I brought the turbine in, and they were sitting, there was three of them sitting in the back, and they opened the window and they said, well, they're going to put the turbine inside the room here, and it was a big plate glass. And I was to watch it from the outside. As soon as I brought it in with them, I helped them a little bit on that, to make sure they didn't drop it. They put it on this table, and I had a one-way mirror, plastic, over the turbine, so they couldn't look in and you know, check the formula more or less. And I looked around for cameras. There was no cameras in there. There was three of them dressed up in a white suit, you might say. Maybe they thought I was crazy and they're going to take me away. But anyway, they ran the test. They started to run the test, but they made me take off. They took it off. They asked me if I could take that one-way mirror effect away from the turbine. They undone it. And then they started to run the test. They were running the test, which is RPM and torque and so forth and so on. And they were running it, and they were looking at each other a little bit strangely, like they all knew that there was something wrong here. So they spent a little time, but they said, we're gonna take that motor off that you have, if you don't mind, and put one motor that was similar to that motor in power. So they exchanged it, they took it off and put their own motor on at that time, and they ran it, and they got the same results, more or less, that they decided to go outside of the other room. The three of them went in there, and I guess they talked it over for about 10 minutes, and they came out with a yellow sheet of paper with lines in it, and it showed where they tested with the motor and without the motor, amperage and RPM and torque. They did those three things. And they came out there by the window and by the place where I could see through it, and they handed me the sheet of paper, and they said, "This is what we have." But well, I said, "What about the test, the signature on the test, certified test?" And they said, "Well, we can't do that. We at this time I know they wouldn't say nothing about it. Actually, they just said, "This is what we have, and we can't sign the certification on it because we don't know exactly what's happening here." And that was what I got in my mind. So that was it. And I took my turbine and left. And but before I left, I said, "You want me to call you people?" He said, No, we'll call you." And that's the last I've heard of him. I never heard from him after that. They never called me. I didn't think they would. But that's the way it went.
I got a question there, Haskell. You mentioned time before where that motor was on there, it would only turn a certain RPM, and then that was direct drive contact to the turbine, and then it drug it to how many RPM, and then what was the RPM of the motor?
It showed the RPM on the test, so many revolutions per minute, but they had the torque on that. I don't remember what the torque was. The RPM and the motor, and that was on the paper on the top part. But they didn't want to put nothing else on there, I know that. And that's what it is. And when I asked them if I should call you, and they said, "No, we'll call you."
You know what the approximate RPMs were?
Well, they ran it up to around 30,000, a little over 30 around there. It was on the paper there on high.
Wasn't that direct drive? There was no, and that motor would only turn how many RPM?
And that was on direct drive, and that was with the vacuum cleaner hose instead of the second dome. You know.
How many RPMs did that starter motor turn?
Well, when I was running it before, it was around 30. You go through the sound barrier.
The motor itself, the motor that started the turbine.
Oh, the motor that was on there was the same, approximately the same RPM that I had. They had different size motors there.
So was the motor 30,000 RPM and?
They put one that was capable of around 9,000. That was the limit, and I think it was 9 amps.
So the motor itself turned about 9 RPMs,
that was
but the air turbine engine produced 30,000 RPM based on the 9,000 RPMs.
The turbine was pulling the motor around at that speed. I was a little afraid of it because it was pulling too much RPM on the electric motor that was running it. It was a vacuum cleaner motor, actually, but that was it. But so they were satisfied that they got rid of me out of the place because they couldn't sign it. They wouldn't sign it anyway because they didn't understand it. That was the whole thing.
Do you remember the name of these scientists?
No, I don't. My mind was on the turbine and what the results were going to be. That was the main thing. And I've had it to other places. You want me to say that? Yeah. Granatelli, no.
Anything you want to say.
Well, I had the turbine before that. I was a carpet contractor, and I had some people do the office in Granatelli, the ones that had the race car at the Speedway, and it caught fire. That was Joe Granatelli. And I told him I'd bring it in, and my turbine motor, I'd maybe be interested in it. And I said, it'll be a few weeks yet. And then I called him up, and he was on a vacation, and I talked to Andy Granatelli, his brother, and I went over in the valley and brought the turbine over there. He had an engineer there with me, and we ran the test. I left I didn't have the one-way mirror on there at that time, and I should have, but Andy didn't know that much about it, but there was a bearing that wasn't working too good, so. And he asked me, how much does the center weigh? And I said 7 pounds. He told me to stop everything. That was going about 30,000 RPM. And he said, you better take this over to my brother. I don't understand it. So and he came back about 2 weeks later, and I called him, and I got him, and I went over there. And I had something on the turbine, which was very light. And it broke loose, and it was made out of a cardboard. And then I had to stop the operation. He said, well, when you get it fixed, I'd like to see you run it properly. And I called him up and said I decided not to go ahead with anybody else right now, and that was the last of it. So that was the race car drivers.
This is Rick Tosada with AATE, the Air Turbine Engine. Ron, there's been a lot of skepticism on the theory of the air turbine engine, and if this really works, what is your answer to that?
Just watch it take off, because once we find out, when we get our test equipment up, we may have to change the timing internally on this, and this is something I'm going to demonstrate to Haskell, how we can change the timing from the outside going through both cylinders without changing it electrically. It's all mechanical. And when we get this back on the test platform back at the lab, then we'll be able to go ahead and bring up a video showing this with a strobe light, smoke going through it, with an infrared gun on it, and we'll actually be able to see the implosion take place. And when we turn this up around 30,000 RPM with the strobe, we'll be able to change the frequency of the light so we can actually stop the blades. They look like they're not even moving, and yet it'll be turning that fast. And then we'll put the smoke through it, and it will show exactly, and any physicist will be able to check that out and see that it is actually working.
Thank you, sir. What do you think about this, Haskell, as you're looking at this right now?
Well, I'm looking at it, and I'm moving it a little bit. It's very smooth running, and it's precision right on the nose. And the workmanship is like a piece of jewelry with a diamond in it. And it's just beyond my conception. From my original model was a horse and buggy, you might say. And look at what it is now. It's a Rolls Royce. And I can't can't tell Ron how much I appreciate what he did, and he did it for himself and for me and for the world. And I believe this will change the whole picture now, that the American inventors came up with something, and the rest of the world can say that America came up with them. And there was 2 people involved. And so we're back to the Edison days, or to the new inventions that come through, like television, some of the major ones, and of course electric power and many other things that they came up with, television. And now here it is in the 20th century. We've got something now that will change the world of energy and give peace on earth and goodwill towards man, and maybe it'll eliminate some of the wars fighting over all these oil projects and doing these other things that they shouldn't be doing. And I have some other ideas about stopping the war.
Okay, thank you.
If you would like, I can go ahead and demonstrate this with a belt and probably turn it up to about 4,000 RPM, which is not to the implosion speed, but you'll see how finely this is balanced. You could put your hand on it and feel nothing, and then watch it take its place there and revolve.
I think that would be great. I think this will help stop the skeptics out there wondering if this really works. Let's give it a shot. Yes, sir.
We've used this drill motor in previous tests. We've had this on a slow speed test, and we had to make a little adapter pulley on this. So we're going to turn this up. The drill motor is good for 2,800 RPM. We did a preliminary run on this, and it ran like 2775. And we're going to run this up to about 4,000.
What are you seeing here, Haskell?
Like I said, it's very wonderful, and now I got to see it run at this time of the year and so forth, and it's really smooth as glass.
Look at the balance, huh?
And the balance looks like it's perfect. It couldn't be any better than that. It was done very correctly and with the right equipment to do it. And I congratulate Ron on what I'm looking at now. It's a diamond in the sky, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Haskell.
And when we take this back to the lab, we're going to sit there and put this back on the actual test platform, and then we're going to set this up so we can actually start doing testing. We'll have a HD camera on this running, and we'll have this thing pretty well laid out so we can actually follow what we're doing.
Thank you. Haskell, what are you looking at right now as you're turning this around?
The formation of this here, the foundation of it, it's pretty good, very good, in fact, just as I envisioned it.
Is there anything that you may want to add or change, anything missing?
No, not right now. There may be some other things that we're going to do later in the future, but it's good right now when we have to test it that way and save some time.
Would you say this is probably close to 80% of being ready to do testing now?
Well, I would say this is at least 80%, yeah, like you said, it's at least that much ready for testing. It won't be too long now.
Do you like that idea of that remote controlled throttle ring versus doing?
I like that starter the way it's been built, and you made the middle part go, and we've got to cover on that.
Now, the way I did the vacuum pump on the way the air continues the spiral this way, the way it discharges and then it goes through the manifold, goes through the outer cylinder to the inner, and then it tackles it at the same angle into the intake. Is that perfectly balanced as far as you can see?
Well, it's in my opinion, the way I'm rotating it now, I know it must be balanced, but it looks like it'll work all right. He said it's balanced, and it was done with machinery, and the unit that he used proved out satisfactorily.
What I'm trying to direct more is the airflow. Forget the balance. The airflow. Notice how I have this so when it discharges the air, you mentioned that it's starved for air. That's the reason why we spent all this extra time. So as it amplifies the implosion to the rear, it will actually discharge very easily and then go through the dividing tube of the tube, continue the spiral until it hits the air intake, and then it starts over.
That's absolutely right. What John said, and I couldn't do any better than that. He refined it, and that's no question about it. As far as I know, the test will be ready very soon.
Do you think I'm starting to understand how this thing works?
Well, I think you may understand how it works, all right. You may be even better making an improvement where I have some
I
improvement.
gotta take after you, son.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm giving you where it works best. You feel it in your
Now,
soul.
one thing else that you said, there was a couple of ideas, but you know, there's that little TMI, too much information. But what you described earlier while I was eating, what we do from the inner tube to the outer tube to direct that air better. We won't say it here on camera, but we will talk about it off camera, because this why this little diaper's on here. It's for TMI, too much information.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll take a long time for somebody to try to come up with it, but it'll be on the market before that. And we'll have it on there, and it'll be over the whole Earth. Will be very interested in putting this unit to work and put very thousands and thousands and millions of people to work.
You know, going based on that, do you think this will help with the recreation of the industrial society? Do you think it will help create more jobs?
Oh, it'll move them ahead 20 years and open up the whole area. We'll be working on this particular project and making the parts and getting it to the market. It'll open up a whole employment stages. And it gives our Earth a chance now to come back to where it was before, and much better possibly. But no, it's just a matter of time now until this goes in production and finish the testing and get it certified.
Now, is that the goal here, Mr. Rockwell, to bring industry back to the United States? We've been so used to bringing industry to other countries, and we have two great American scientists here, and are we going to keep this in America?
Definitely keep it here in Las Vegas, Nevada. We'll probably go on the map big time, because I want to open up a very large manufacturing there for electricity. And then also there's slight changes to do to this. It actually becomes a vacuum rocket. And I explained this to Haskell, but I don't want to say too much on a film that's going to go worldwide, that we're going to keep it very hush-hush to that point. But we're going to get it out there on a generator producing electricity, and at that point we will leave it there.
What you want to get in there, that one of Rockwell Scientific Research's major goals is retrofitting coal-fired utility plants, nuclear facilities, and even hydroelectric, because of the diminishing water revenues or water resources. Okay, so that's real important, because if this is seen, the big financial people that are out there for utility is going to be really looking at that. So try to get that in there if you can, Ron.
Well, that's what we explained outside, that one of the big goals is to sit there and retrofit the nuclear power plants by taking the nuclear reactor out instead of producing steam. This will take the place of the steam turbine, and then the containment area will still stay the same, and you got all the electrical in. And we'll build this probably 7 to 8 foot in diameter, and we'll produce it up close to 1 million horsepower and still turn that big electric generator, probably somewhere is right around 300,000 kV, and run it at 3,500 RPM. And I want to produce 10 of these in Las Vegas, Nevada, with our own power grid, and we can put every human body in Nevada to work. Even the people living on the streets will get a grip of going forward. And then all our injured military that came in. I was in the 83rd United States Air Force, Squadron 83. And I've done a lot of flight training. I'm a federal licensed pilot, and I've done a lot of flying. And to bring in the injured veterans, they're coming back here. That is one of the primary goals. And we bring these people and put them on a job, even if they come in with no legs, no arms, and they got a mind to think. All you need to do is push that button and that CNC and watch that A532 take off and run, and parts are flying. And my goal is to produce 100 of these a day, every 24 hours. And this will all be done in injection molding. It won't have all this polished aluminum on it. These will all be done in production. And the blades will all be titanium. We'll be doing different metals in it and setting it up with an air suspended bearing with a foil bearing that was used back in the early 50s. That was used on jet engines, and it's called a foil bearing. What it does, the startup and the low speed is what tears these jet engine bearings up. Well, if you take and put it with a magnetic suspended bearing with a foil bearing, two things take place. You eliminate the startup problem and you eliminate the low speed. And I would say theoretically you could put a 50-year unconditional warranty on the engine and let it run 24 hours a day.
What do you think about what you're hearing here, Haskell?
Well, he said, couldn't have said it any better than what he'd said. I don't think I could have done it. He's got the idea just similar to what I'm thinking. So I would say, God bless the turbine, and let's go forward with it and get it out and on the market quick as possible.
And
I'm doing 18 hours a day, young'un, and it's wearing me out.
you know, Ron, if you go online, there's a lot of theory about vortex implosion, but no one has ever built one of these machines that actually proves this theory. Can you bring this concept into reality?
100% into reality, because when this goes back on the test platform, then we're going to start putting the test equipment up so we can actually run the test. We will verify it with a federal marshal who has seen it. He's watched it, he understands it, and when we get it done where it's foolproof on our platform, and he will watch it, you'll be watching it, everybody will be watching it, and then we'll take it, and he said, I'll make a phone call to JPL or Wiley, and once that is released, we'll own transportation and power, and every American will be back to work, and those windmills are the biggest dinosaur I've ever seen. And what they put out in electricity and what it costs to build one of those, looking at one of these hypothetically in a production mode, you're probably looking somewhere around $8,000 roughly when we do in a high-speed production mode. You tie it to a 50 kW generator, 50 kW. You power this whole building and the hotel next door, and you're going to get your reward back. Your electric bill will go down 85%.
This is Rick Tosada one more time with the aerodynamic air turbine engine, also known as the Crystal Ion. This will be the questions and answers part of the show here. We have several people in our audience who are concerned and have some questions for Mr. Rockwell and Mr. Haskell Karl. Any questions?
Yes, Rick, I have a question. It's my understanding, Ron and Karl, that one of the goals is to build units large enough to retrofit coal-fired utility plants, hydroelectric, nuclear. And it's my understanding that, boy, by doing that and using the air turbine engine, we know we have a water shortage in America. This is really going to help out. Is that correct?
That's very much correct, and especially on the hydroelectric power plants, like in the dams, you don't have to let the water out no more. You can keep the water within and use it where it needs to be used, and you can easily retrofit this to those big monster generators.
Also, it's my understanding that this, by retrofitting these utility plants, it's not taken away from the utilities' profits, but it's actually going to help them and enhance their position, because it's also my understanding that the utility grid is really outdated. And so by some of the profits from the air turbine engine and saving the cost will help to modernize the utility grid, what they're calling now the smart grid. Is that right?
That's very much correct. And the coal-burning power plants, for instance, it's roughly $2 billion, that's with a B, just for the cooling towers, not counting for cleaning the coal and getting it ready for burning, you're able to save that, and then the people that operate in those facilities can produce more profit, healthier environment, and better health benefits for the employees, and they'll have a better reserve in funds, and the power grid, they could actually drop the electric bill down lower to the actual home owner.
Sounds like a win-win situation to me. Any more questions?
Yes, Mr. Rockwell, if I understand you right, your turbine will help me and my family be able to have a cheaper electric bill. In this time and the economy the way it is now, families are trying every way we can to save every dollar we can. How will this help my family?
You take one of these smaller units like the one that's on this table, you could hook this up to a 30 or even a 25 kW generator and put it online, and then pull your main breaker loose and just run it continually on this. Now your electric bill is you're just going to divide the expense factor of what this costs to put there, and I would say you're down probably 85 to 90% less on the utility bill.
Wait a minute, let me think how he said that.
How is it going to help your family? How is it going to help them reduce their costs, their bills?
Okay.
And that's good that somebody's asking how you can help my family. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Rockwell, my question is, will your turbine help my family be able to save on our utility bills in the long run?
Yes, it will, because when a power utility company has these retrofit units running, they will have a much lesser expense factor for electricity, and then they can share it to you as a homeowner and reduce your overhead expense.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to commend both of you gentlemen for building this engine, this motor, this air turbine ion. Beautiful. Now, what about Mexico? One of the biggest cities, pollution-wise. Let's say that they start putting these things in homes and generating plants. Mass production. All of a sudden, people are starting to call in to buy these motors. What's the limit? How the length of time, the waiting period, anything like that?
Well, I've been in Mexico City, and it's like 26 miles across that city, and it is very bad air pollution down there. I'm aware of it. You start retrofitting these down there on generators, you can retrofit them into an automobile, and you will reduce smog down there. It is such high level, it would be hard to try to put numbers on it, other than it would just drop the pollution rate. And we're going to try to set these up here where we can produce 100 of them a day, and if we get the proper backing for the factory, we could actually put probably 30 of these, like these A532A Centroid CNC systems up, not counting the assembly line. We could realistically put out probably better than 4,000 units a month, and that's being shipped, boxed, tested, and out the door.
As far as the cost behind this, some people may think this would be too expensive for them. Would the average Joe be able to, at least one day in the future, be able to afford one of these?
I would say that's not very far down the road, because if you take a long block 350 Chevrolet from a GM dealer, the expense of that, we will be trying to get these engines down to match the same price of a GM long block, equal price. And just imagine, no radiators, no oil changes, no filters, no cooling system problems, no tune-ups, no spark plugs. Just add up the expense on oil and fuel alone. And you imagine, you come down and order one of these, you want to retrofit it, and you got an install kit to put it in, say, a Bronco or a Chevrolet half-ton, and you'll get a complete, you get a retrofit kit, get an engine. The whole thing could be almost equal in dollars to what it is currently today. And can you just imagine, you're putting that in there, and then now you can take your exhaust system out and throw it away? And now, you know what's going to be really the big problem? How are they going to smog it?
How about the, I'll get cut. Okay, I have another question in the audience right now.
Yeah, Ron, on the price, I'm sure that you don't have prices set up exactly on how much it's going to cost for an air turbine engine, whether it's an automobile. I'm sure you're going to have to go through more testing and building smaller units, put them in vehicles before you can reach that conclusion of what it's going to cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is very much so correct.
Any further questions? Haskell, do you have any questions? Any answers?
Not really. He said it all as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, looks like another question from the audience. Yes, sir.
Ron, sounds like to me that there's a multitude of applications for your air turbine engine. Is that right?
That is very correct. Very correct.
Would those applications be like in automobiles, besides your utility grid that you want to cover? How about in the military for vehicles and boats, planes, etc.?
Yes, also heavy cruise ships, aircraft carriers, submarines, super silent running.
Do you want to say something, Haskell?
Yes, this would help NASA out. They wouldn't have to worry about solar panels on Mars or any other place. And they can move to the moon now, and they'll have permanent power to do what they have to do. And it has many, many facets that we can't even think about. Okay.
This is some beautiful technology. Any more questions? Any more questions about Mexico? In a world of wars, skepticisms, politics, poverty, seems to me that these two gentlemen, Mr. Ron Rockwell and Haskell Karl, are not only revolutioning science, but the world as we see it today. This air turbine engine is something else and will bring us to a whole new level in our lifetime and for the future of our children. I'd like to say thank you to both of them, and God bless the air turbine engine, and God bless America.
All right, thank you very much, and being back together with Haskell Karl. If it wasn't for him, what you see here wouldn't be here.
Well, thank you, Ron, very much. It's both of us that did the job, and I give you equal credit, and that's the way it goes. And God bless America and the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. And this is Rick Tosada signing off for AATE, the Crystal Ion Aerodynamic Air Turbine Engine.